A homeless girl whispered, "Hi, Mom, but my daughter died 8 years ago." She was halfway through her untouched meal when a small, gravel-voiced whisper cut through the quiet clatter of the upscale restaurant. "Can I eat your leftovers?" Victoria Sterling looked up, startled, and met the eyes of a girl no older than 8, barefoot, thin, and too quiet for someone so young. The question should have unsettled her, maybe even annoyed her, but instead it wrapped around something deep and long buried in her chest. The girl didn't beg. She simply asked with a kind of quiet dignity that shattered Victoria's carefully built walls. It was her daughter's birthday, or would have been had she lived. For years, Victoria had silenced the ache, buried the shame, and convinced herself that what happened back then had been necessary. But this child's face, this eerie familiarity in her expression, cracked that lie wide open. Victoria slid the plate across and whispered, "What's your name?" The girl paused, then replied, "Emma." And just like that, the world tilted. Something unspoken passed between them, haunting, magnetic, irreversible. A question of hunger had become a reckoning far deeper than food. Victoria Sterling sat alone at a corner table in the kind of restaurant where the silverware gleamed like jewelry and no one asked questions unless they came with wine. The linen napkin remained perfectly folded in her lap, her plate untouched except for a single cut of steak she hadn't managed to swallow. Around her, laughter rose in elegant waves, clinking glasses, polished smiles, couples toasting anniversaries and boardroom victories. But for Victoria, time had curled in on itself. This day, this dinner was a ritual she repeated every year in silence, the birthday of the baby girl she had once believed died shortly after birth. It was supposed to bring closure, but instead it always reopened a wound she never let anyone see. She didn't cry. She didn't drink. She simply sat, composed, hollowed out. She was halfway through pretending to enjoy the ambiance when a shadow crossed her table. At first she assumed it was a waiter, until a low voice cracked, and hoarse, barely more than a whisper, spoke beside her. "Can I eat your leftovers?" Victoria turned slowly. Standing there was a little girl. Barefoot, dirty eyes, far too knowing for someone her age. Everything about the child screamed of hardship, but her voice had held no desperation. It had been calm, measured, almost polite. The girl didn't look away, didn't fidget or shuffle like a child who knew she wasn't welcome. She just stared. Something about her, something impossible, made Victoria's heart seize. The angle of her cheekbones, the quiet fire in her gaze, a familiar sadness that gripped Victoria by the throat. She slid the plate toward the girl and said nothing, afraid that if she spoke, the air would shatter. It was the 8th birthday of a child Victoria Sterling had never held, never named aloud, and never truly buried. Every year, June 29th arrived like a ghost, wrapped in silk, quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. On paper, her daughter had died just minutes after birth, a stillborn marked only by time and silence. But in Victoria's chest, the ache never followed logic or documentation. It pulsed, constant and invisible, a phantom pain from a wound no one could see. She had never told anyone, not colleagues, not friends, not even Jolene, her loyal housekeeper who had been with her through every political campaign and televised speech. To the world, Victoria was a polished, self-made woman, unshakable, decisive, cold when necessary. But behind every sharp victory was this one unspoken loss. This one day she carved out from her calendar to simply sit, remember, and pretend the world hadn't gone so terribly wrong. She would dress in black, not for mourning, but for control. She would order the most expensive wine and never touch it. And she would imagine just for a few moments what it might have been like to braid her daughter's hair or hear her laugh. 8. Today, she would have been 8 old enough to read books by herself, to climb trees, to question everything. Victoria stared at the untouched meal in front of her, her mind drifting through alternate timelines she would never get to live. Outside rain smeared against the restaurant windows, and for a brief second she saw a tiny handprint in the condensation, imagined, of course, but vivid enough to take her breath away. She exhaled slowly, unaware that just feet away, The very child she had grieved for 8 years was about to ask a question that would unravel every truth she thought she knew. The quiet hum of soft jazz music filled the upscale restaurant, blending with the low murmur of conversation and the gentle clinking of fine china. Victoria Sterling sat alone in her usual corner, her eyes fixed on the fading rain outside, when a small, hesitant voice interrupted the carefully maintained silence. "Excuse me, ma'am. Could I please eat your leftovers?" The words were barely audible, trembling with both hunger and shame. Victoria looked up, expecting a server, but instead met the gaze of a little girl no older than 8. The child's clothes hung loosely worn and dirty, a stark contrast to the polished marble and crystal surrounding them. Her hair was matted, and her eyes, astonishingly bright and green, shone with a mixture of hope and vulnerability that pierced through Victoria's carefully guarded walls. The restaurant fell silent as other diners turned to watch, some with scorn, others with pity. A waiter's face flushed with embarrassment as he hurried forward, prepared to escort the girl away, but Victoria's voice stopped him, calm, steady, unexpectedly. Firm. "It's all right. Let her stay." The child blinked surprise and disbelief flickering across her face as she cautiously moved toward the table. Victoria pushed her plate forward, a silent invitation, and watched as Emma eagerly, almost ravenously, began to eat. As she did, Victoria's eyes caught a small, tarnished silver locket resting against the child's collarbone, an object so familiar it stole her breath. In that instant, the world around them blurred, and a long-buried hope stirred inside Victoria's heart that this fragile, wandering girl might be the daughter she had mourned for years, lost, but somehow found in the most unexpected way. Victoria's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the little girl, the unfamiliar yet hauntingly familiar face, before her stirring memories, long buried beneath layers of grief and disbelief. For a moment time seemed to pause in that luxurious restaurant, the world outside fading into insignificance as an overwhelming surge of emotion flooded through her. Shock, hope, and a deep, aching longing all tangled together. The child's green eyes, wide with cautious trust, met Victoria's gaze, and something unspoken passed between them, a fragile thread of connection that defied explanation. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Victoria reached out gently and pushed her untouched plate toward Emma, offering an unspoken invitation to share her meal. "Come sit with me," she said softly. Her voice barely above a whisper, but steady, filled with a kindness she hadn't known she still possessed. Emma's small hands trembled as she cautiously accepted the offer, sliding into the seat beside Victoria, her eyes never leaving the woman who had suddenly become the center of her fragile world. Around them, the bustling restaurant seemed to resume its rhythm, the clinking of glasses and murmured conversations, slowly returning as if acknowledging the quiet miracle unfolding in the corner booth. Victoria watched Emma eat with a mixture of tenderness and disbelief, every bite a testament to the child's resilience and the harshness of the years she had endured alone. The weight of the moment settled over Victoria like a delicate veil. Here was a broken yet beautiful girl, a stranger who somehow felt like the missing piece of her own shattered past. The silver locket glinted faintly at Emma's throat, a silent beacon that called Victoria's heart home. In that shared meal, in that small act of kindness, Victoria found a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim what had been lost and to finally begin to heal the wounds that had haunted her for nearly 2 decades. As Victoria listened to Emma speak softly about her life on the streets, the foster homes she'd been shuffled through, and the loneliness that had become her constant companion, a strange and powerful sensation began to swell within her chest. It was more than mere recognition. It was a profound, almost haunting familiarity that seemed to reach across the years, weaving invisible threads between the past and the present. The way Emma's green eyes flickered with a mixture of cautious hope and guarded resilience mirrored the very same spark Victoria had seen so many times in her own daughter's eyes before she was taken away. Each word Emma uttered carried the weight of survival, yet beneath it all, there was a softness and a quiet dignity that reminded Victoria of lullabies sung in a long-forgotten nursery, whispered promises made in the quiet hours of the night. Victoria found herself drawn to the subtle ways Emma moved, the tentative tilt of her head when she spoke, the slight hesitation in her gestures, the delicate grace in her steps across the marble floor. It was as though the lost years had folded back upon themselves, revealing a child she had mourned for nearly 2 decades, standing before her alive and fragile but undeniably real. The resemblance was not just physical but etched deep in the mannerisms and the spirit of the girl who now sat beside her, eating quietly, but with an intensity that spoke volumes. Victoria's mind raced, piecing together memories of lullabies, the curve of a smile, the shape of a hand, echoes of a past she had tried desperately to forget, but never truly could. The tarnished silver locket around Emma's neck, almost hidden beneath the grime and rags, only confirmed what her heart had begun to suspect. It was the same small crescent moon-shaped charm Victoria had worn as a reminder of her lost child, a symbol of a bond severed but never broken. As Emma's eyes met hers again, wide and trusting despite everything, Victoria felt the fragile walls she had built around her grief begin to crumble. The little girl was more than a stranger asking for leftovers. She was the living proof of a miracle Victoria had long given up believing in, the chance to find the daughter she thought she had lost forever, here in the dim light of a New York restaurant. Victoria sat quietly, her gaze never leaving Emma's face, as the child finished the last bite of the offered meal. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the room, but it was the light in Emma's extraordinary green eyes that held Victoria's attention entirely. Those eyes, so vivid, so alive, carried an intensity that made her heart ache and hope all at once. It was as if those eyes told a story of survival against impossible odds, a tale Victoria had only dared to dream about during lonely nights spent mourning a daughter she had been told was gone forever. Watching Emma, the subtle expressions that flickered across her face, the tentative smiles, the cautious glances, the quiet moments of vulnerability, reminded Victoria painfully of the little girl she once held in her arms, so fragile and full of promise, before the cruel hands of fate had torn them apart. The way Emma moved, the softness in her voice, even the quiet strength in her presence felt like echoes from a past she had buried deep within her heart. It was a familiarity that defied explanation, an unspoken bond forged by love loss and longing stretched across nearly 2 decades. As the restaurant buzzed softly with murmurs from curious onlookers, Victoria felt the weight of years of grief begin to lift, just slightly replaced by a cautious hope she had not allowed herself to feel in far too long. In that moment, with Emma sitting beside her, clutching the worn silver locket at her throat, a token that had survived years of hardship and separation, Victoria whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and wonder. "Those eyes. It's as if she never left me." The words hung in the air between them, fragile yet powerful. A quiet acknowledgement of a connection neither time nor circumstance could sever. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Neither had expected a chance for healing and reunion woven through those unforgettable, haunting eyes. The city lights blurred past the windows of the sleek black Mercedes as Victoria drove through the quiet streets, the hum of the engine filling the silence between her and Emma. The night air, cool and crisp, seeped faintly through the cracked window, mingling with the faint scent of perfume and lingering hope that had settled over the car since their unexpected meeting at the restaurant. Emma sat beside her, clutching the takeout container tightly, her small hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and the unfamiliarity of this new world she was suddenly thrust into. Her wide eyes reflected the glowing cityscape, marveling at the towering buildings and the soft glow of street lamps that seemed like distant stars just out of reach. "I've never been in a car this nice," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with awe, her fingers tracing the smooth leather seats with tentative wonder. Victoria's heart clenched at the child's innocent amazement and the stark contrast to the harsh reality Emma had endured for so many years. She thought of the cold, unforgiving streets, the nights filled with hunger and fear, and the countless times Emma had been overlooked, invisible to the world. As the car finally descended into the underground garage of Victoria's penthouse building, Emma's disbelief deepened. "You live here all alone?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and something softer, perhaps longing or disbelief. Victoria nodded, the weight of solitude she had carried for so long, pressing down anew with the simple truth of those words. "Yes," she said softly, all alone. The elevator ride up was quiet, save for Emma's quiet breaths and the steady rhythm of the elevator music. When the doors slid open to reveal the sprawling marble foyer and sweeping views of Central Park, beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Emma gasped, stepping cautiously into the pristine space. The grandeur and cold perfection of the penthouse contrasted sharply with the ragged, broken child who had just entered. Yet, in that moment, something fragile and hopeful stirred between them. A silent promise that this night was the beginning of something new, something healing, something finally real. As Emma finally drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep on the guest room couch, the exhaustion of the day finally overtaking her small frame, Victoria quietly closed the door behind her and made her way to the study. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantel, a comforting rhythm in the stillness of the night. She moved toward the old wooden box she had hidden away years ago, a box she hadn't dared to open since the night she lost her daughter. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid, and a rush of memories flooded her mind. Inside were the precious remnants of a past she had tried desperately to bury, ultrasound photos of a tiny life she had carried inside her, a hospital bracelet worn by a newborn, and most importantly, the silver locket she had cherished, the same locket she had worn every day after her daughter's birth, a symbol of a bond she thought had been severed forever. Her fingers traced the delicate engraving on the locket's surface, the cool metal smooth beneath her touch, and her breath caught in her throat. She reached in further and pulled out the other locket, a tarnished silver piece, worn and faint, but unmistakably identical to her own. The sight of it struck her like lightning. The connection was undeniable. It was the same design, the same shape, the same tiny clasp. She remembered how she had given that locket to her daughter, hoping it would protect her even if she could not. Holding the two lockets side by side, Victoria's heart ached with a mixture of grief and hope. How could this be? How could this child, this broken, weary little girl, sleeping just down the hall, possess the very same locket she had given to the baby she had mourned for so long? The quiet proof in her hands challenged everything she had believed about loss and finality. Her eyes welled with tears as the years of pained silence and unanswered questions converged in that moment. The box seemed to pulse with the weight of history, of love, lost, of secrets, buried, of lives torn apart, and quietly waiting to be reclaimed. She whispered into the stillness, "The eyes, it's like she never really left me." The words hung heavy in the air, a fragile hope beginning to take root in the depths of her soul. This simple silver locket had become a lifeline, a thread connecting a mother to a daughter who was not lost, only hidden, waiting to be found once more. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, Victoria sat in silence, clutching the lockets close, ready to face the truth that the coming day would bring. The unexpected knock at the door startled Victoria from her restless thoughts, the persistent tapping echoing through the quiet penthouse late in the afternoon. She opened the door to reveal Jolene, the longtime housekeeper who had cared for Victoria during her pregnancy and the heartbreaking days that followed. Jolene's face was etched with time, but her eyes still held the warmth and gentleness Victoria had remembered. Yet as Jolene stepped inside and her gaze fell upon Emma, sitting quietly on the couch, clutching the small silver locket, the years of suppressed emotions overwhelmed her. Without a word, Jolene's eyes welled up with tears, and her composure crumbled as she walked toward the girl with trembling hands. The sight of Emma, the fragile child who carried an undeniable resemblance to the baby Jolene had once cared for, shattered the careful barriers Jolene had maintained all these years. She knelt down beside Emma, her voice barely a whisper, trembling with both disbelief and affection. "Oh, my baby," Jolene murmured, her tears falling freely. "Now I never thought I'd see you again." Emma looked up at Jolene, sensing the deep sorrow and love mingling in the older woman's expression, the weight of decades compressed into a moment of recognition. Victoria watched silently, her own heart tightening, as she witnessed Jolene's raw reaction, a living testament to the truth she had begun to uncover. Jolene reached out gently, brushing a stray lock of dirty hair from Emma's forehead, her fingers lingering as though trying to confirm the reality before her. "You were always so small, so fragile," Jolene said softly, her voice cracking. "They told me you were gone. That fire took you away." Emma's eyes flickered with sadness but also curiosity, and Jolene continued, "I kept your little things safe. The locket, the blanket, all of it." She reached into her bag and carefully pulled out a faded bundle wrapped in tissue paper, setting it on the table in front of Victoria and Emma. The bundle contained small mementos, each piece a fragment of a past Victoria thought had been erased forever. "I swore I'd never forget you, never stop hoping," Jolene said, looking directly at Victoria. "And now here you are." Victoria felt tears prick her own eyes, the weight of years collapsing into this single moment of reunion. Jolene's presence was more than a comfort. It was a bridge to the past, an affirmation of the daughter she had never truly lost. Emma reached out tentatively, her small hand finding Jolene's, and for the first time since her arrival, a genuine smile broke across her face. The room filled with a quiet, healing energy, the fragile beginnings of a family reclaiming what had been stolen piece by precious piece. Victoria realized then that this was just the start of their journey, that with Jolene's help, the buried truths could finally emerge, and the shadows of the past might finally give way to light. Jolene's voice trembled with conviction as she looked directly into Victoria's eyes, the weight of years of silence and sorrow pressing down in the room. "She is your daughter," Jolene said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "I know it because I have never seen eyes like those before or since. There's no mistaking them." Her hands clasped tightly together as if drawing strength from her own words, and the certainty in her voice filled the space with an undeniable truth that Victoria had longed to hear but feared might never come. Jolene continued, her tone softening yet steady. "When I first saw her sitting here so small and fragile, something inside me broke open. It wasn't just the resemblance, though, that is striking, but the way she carries herself, the way she looks at the world with those same green eyes that once looked up at me from your arms." Victoria's breath caught as Jolene described the unmistakable echo of the past in Emma's presence. The same quiet strength, the same unspoken pain and hope intertwined in those familiar eyes. "I remember holding your baby," Victoria Jolene said, her voice thick with emotion. "Those eyes were the first thing that captured my heart. I never got to watch her grow up, never got to see the person she would become, but those eyes, they stayed with me every day." The room seemed to hold its breath as Jolene's certainty settled around them like a protective shield. Victoria felt a surge of emotion welling up, hope, fear, relief, and an aching sorrow that had been buried too long. Jolene's affirmation was more than words. It was a lifeline thrown across a sea of years lost to lies and deception. "I've watched over what little was left behind for her," Jolene said quietly. "The locket, the blankets, the pictures. And every time I thought about her, I prayed that one day she would find her way back to you." Victoria reached out trembling and took Jolene's hands in hers, the warmth and truth flowing between them, grounding her in a moment she had only dared to dream of. Emma, seated nearby, looked up at Jolene and Victoria, sensing the deep connection and the powerful revelation unfolding around her. Jolene's words were a bridge spanning the years, transforming doubt into certainty, confusion into clarity. "There is no mistake," Jolene said one last time, her voice steady and sure. "That child is yours. She always has been and she always will be. And she—" Victoria's heart ached with both joy and the pain of what had been stolen. But in that moment, wrapped in Jolene's steadfast conviction and Emma's quiet presence, she finally felt the first true flicker of hope. A hope that would ignite a fierce determination to reclaim the life that had been stolen from them both. The journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and heartbreak, but with the truth laid bare and the undeniable proof in front of her, Victoria knew she was no longer alone. Emma was here, and with Jolene's unwavering affirmation, the impossible was beginning to feel real. Victoria sat quietly beside Emma's small bed, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting gentle shadows across the room. The child's breathing was slow and even a fragile rhythm that seemed to steady Victoria's own racing heart. She reached out cautiously, her fingers trembling as they brushed the tangled strands of Emma's hair away from her face, careful not to disturb the peaceful sleep that had finally come after such a long, harrowing day. As her hand closed softly around Emma's small, weathered one, a wave of emotion crashed through Victoria, an overwhelming mixture of relief, sorrow, and an aching love that defied time and circumstance. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks, tracing paths of pain and hope across her skin. "You never left me," she whispered, her voice breaking but steady. "Not truly, not ever." The weight of 18 years of grief, fear, and longing pressed down on her chest, but in this moment, holding Emma's hand, it began to lift just enough for a flicker of peace to take root. "I'm going to bring you home." Victoria vowed softly, her words a promise carved from the deepest part of her soul. "I will never let anything take you away from me again." The room seemed to hold its breath with her, as if the walls themselves recognized the significance of this silent oath. Emma's peaceful face, framed by the pale light, looked so fragile, so achingly vulnerable, yet somehow also fierce in its quiet resilience. Victoria traced the curve of her daughter's cheek with a trembling fingertip, memorizing every detail, the slight flush of sleep, the softness of her lips, the faint freckles that scattered across her nose like stars. It was a portrait of a childhood lost and reclaimed, a story unfinished but no longer forgotten. Though the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, Victoria felt a steadfast determination ignite within her, a fierce protectiveness that would shield Emma from whatever threats lurked beyond the safety of these walls. She would fight with every ounce of strength, every breath she had left, to restore the life that had been stolen. "You've been through so much, my brave girl," she whispered, "but now you're safe and we're together." The tears continued to fall silently as Victoria pulled the covers gently over Emma's small frame, tucking her in with the tenderness of a mother finally reunited with her lost child. In the quiet stillness of the night, with Emma's hand still warm in hers, Victoria made a sacred promise not only to the sleeping child before her, but to herself, that she would do everything in her power to heal the wounds of the past, to build a future where no one could ever tear them apart again. "I love you," she breathed, "and I will never stop loving you. You're home now, Emma. You're finally home." Victoria's footsteps echoed softly in the narrow hallway as she approached the modest office of Claire, a former social worker whose name had surfaced repeatedly during her search for answers. The building was far removed from the gleaming towers and polished conference rooms. Victoria was accustomed to a quiet, unassuming place where lives were quietly changed behind closed doors. She paused briefly, gathering her thoughts before knocking gently on the worn wooden door. "Claire." "It's Victoria Sterling," she said when the door creaked open, her voice steady but carrying the weight of years of unanswered questions. Claire, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a kind but guarded expression, stepped aside to let her in. The room smelled faintly of old books and faint coffee, the clutter of files and papers speaking to years of hard work and difficult decisions. As they sat down across from each other, Victoria's gaze searched Claire's face for any sign of recognition or willingness to help. "I'm trying to understand what really happened 18 years ago." Victoria began, her voice low but urgent. "Emma, my daughter, she was taken from the hospital under suspicious circumstances, and I believe you might have information about her case." Claire's face tightened, a flicker of pain crossing her features before she nodded slowly. "That case was complicated," she said carefully. "There were orders that came from higher-up orders to keep things quiet, to make certain files disappear. It wasn't just about protocol. It was about power and control." Victoria leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Do you know who was behind it? Who made those decisions? Claire hesitated, then whispered, "There were men in suits who shouldn't have been there influencing every step, and when I tried to ask questions, I was warned to stay silent." The weight of Claire's confession settled between them, a chilling confirmation of Victoria's worst fears. Yet beneath the fear was a flicker of hope, a hope that the truth could still be uncovered and justice could be found. "Thank you, Claire." Victoria said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Your courage in telling me this means everything. We'll find a way to bring this to light for Emma, for every child who's been silenced." As she left the office, Victoria felt a renewed determination stirring within her. No matter the cost, she would expose the secrets buried in the shadows and reclaim the future that had been stolen from her family. Claire's eyes welled with tears as she finally spoke the words Victoria had dreaded, but needed to hear. "Victoria, I have to be honest with you." She began, her voice trembling with a mixture of guilt and fear. "The death certificate you were shown, the one that said your baby died shortly after birth, it was fabricated." Victoria's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding with disbelief. Claire continued, "I was the one who signed it. I didn't want you to know the truth, but it wasn't my choice. I was pressured, threatened even by powerful people who wanted to erase your daughter from existence." The weight of those words crashed down on Victoria, each syllable unraveling the fragile threads of what she had believed for so long. Claire's hands shook as she unfolded the story, explaining how she had been caught in a web of corruption and fear. "They told me if I didn't cooperate, my career would be over, maybe worse. I was scared, but every day since I've regretted it. I've lived with the lie, watching you grieve a child who was still alive somewhere out there." Victoria's eyes burned with tears she fought to hold back, but Claire's confession gave a raw clarity to the mystery that had haunted her for nearly 2 decades. "This wasn't just a mistake," Claire said, her voice breaking. "It was a calculated cover-up to protect someone with influence, someone who didn't want the truth to come out." Victoria clenched her fists, feeling the fierce surge of determination rise within her. The revelation was shattering, but it was also the key, the final piece that could unlock the truth and bring justice for Emma. "Thank you for telling me," Victoria whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Now it's time to make sure the world knows. We're going to bring her home, no matter what it takes." As she left Claire's office, Victoria felt the heavy burden of the past begin to shift, replaced by a renewed hope that the years lost could finally be reclaimed and the lies exposed for all to see. Claire's confession deepened as she revealed the true source of the orders that had forced her hand all those years ago. "It wasn't just some faceless bureaucracy, Victoria," she said quietly, her eyes haunted by the memory. "The whole thing was orchestrated at the highest level. Senator Thomas Callahan, your godfather and political guardian, gave the command to seal your daughter's fate." Victoria recoiled at the name, the man she had once trusted implicitly, who had helped shape her career and public image. Claire explained how Callahan had been a powerful figure behind the scenes, controlling not only political outcomes but personal lives as well. "He saw your pregnancy as a liability, a threat to the carefully crafted image he wanted for you and for himself," Claire continued. "There were fears that scandal would ruin alliances, damage campaigns. So when your daughter was born, prematurely fragile and vulnerable, Callahan insisted on removing her, quietly erasing any trace that might cause trouble." The cold calculation behind the decision struck Victoria with brutal clarity. Claire's voice faltered as she described the coercion and intimidation she endured, forced to falsify documents and silence her conscience. "They told me the senator's influence was absolute. Anyone who resisted would face ruin, maybe worse. It was made clear that protecting Callahan's interests came before everything, even a child's life." Victoria's hands clenched tightly, anger and betrayal burning in her chest. This was no random act of cruelty, but a deliberate conspiracy to control and manipulate, rooted in power and political ambition. "Callahan used his reach to bury the truth, to keep you in the dark," Claire said. "But the lies can't hold forever." Victoria swallowed hard, the weight of this revelation settling heavily on her shoulders, but also igniting a fierce resolve. "If Callahan thought he could destroy my family and my future, he underestimated me," she said with quiet determination. Now it's time to bring everything into the light no matter who stands in my way. As she stepped out of the office, Victoria knew the fight ahead would be dangerous and complicated, but nothing would stop her from reclaiming her daughter and exposing the dark shadows cast by those who betrayed her. Senator Thomas Callahan's fear of scandal ran deeper than anyone could have imagined, especially when it involved Victoria Sterling's secret daughter. To Callahan, the revelation of a child born out of wedlock, particularly one as fragile and vulnerable as Victoria's baby, posed an existential threat not just to Victoria's rising political career, but to the carefully curated image of their family as paragons of virtue and success. Callahan was a master strategist, well-versed in the ruthless world of politics, where perception often mattered more than truth. He understood that even a whisper of impropriety could shatter alliances, alienate donors, and unravel years of painstakingly built goodwill. The idea of Victoria as a flawless, untarnished figurehead was central to the political machine he had helped craft, and any hint of a love child would be weaponized by opponents to destroy that image. For Callahan, it wasn't just about protecting Victoria. It was about safeguarding his own legacy and influence as the family's political godfather. The scandal could trigger a domino effect, jeopardizing not only Victoria's ambitions, but also the reputations of those aligned with her, plunging their tightly controlled world into chaos. He was convinced that removing the child from the public eye, fabricating a story of death and erasing any evidence of her existence, was the only way to preserve order and maintain power. Callahan's actions were cold, calculated, and devoid of empathy, driven by a chilling belief that the ends justified the means. The child in his eyes was collateral damage in a larger game of political survival. Yet, beneath his iron resolve, there lingered an undeniable fear that one day the truth might emerge, unraveling everything he'd fought so hard to protect. But for now, Callahan chose silence, concealment, and manipulation, wielding his power like a weapon to control not just Victoria's destiny, but the very narrative of their lives. Claire's voice trembled as the weight of years of silence finally broke free, tears spilling down her cheeks in a torrent of guilt and sorrow she could no longer contain. "I never abandoned her," she sobbed, clutching Victoria's hands as if seeking forgiveness. "Not just from her, but from herself. It wasn't me who gave up on your daughter. It was them, the ones in power, the people who wanted her erased from this world as if she never existed." Her words hung heavy in the quiet room, each syllable a dam bursting after years of secrecy. Claire recounted the pressure she'd faced, how she had been coerced into fabricating false documents, rewriting records, and telling lies that would haunt her conscience for decades. "They made me sign papers I couldn't refuse," she confessed, her voice cracking with the memory. "I was just a pawn, a frightened woman caught in a web of corruption and lies. Every time I thought about that baby, I hoped someone would find her, that the truth would come out. But they made sure she was invisible, hidden in plain sight. Her tears became a silent testament to the cruelty inflicted on an innocent child and the cruelty of a system designed to protect reputations rather than lives. I remember holding her, the smallest, most fragile thing," Claire whispered, her fingers trembling. "And then I watched as they stole her away, promising it was for her own good. But it was a lie. They took her from me, from you, from the world." The room was thick with sorrow and rage as Claire's confession laid bare the brutal betrayal. "I never stopped thinking about her," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." But the truth was buried deep, almost lost forever. It's time it comes back to light. Victoria held the fragile, yellowed copy of the falsified death certificate in her hands, the edges worn from years of being hidden away like a dark secret that had shaped her entire life. The official seal looked real enough, the signatures convincingly forged, but the truth behind the paper was a cruel lie, an erasure of her daughter's very existence. Her eyes scanned the document once more, the weight of its deception pressing down on her heart. How many years had she mourned a child who was still alive? How many moments of grief, hope, and emptiness had been stolen by this cruel forgery? Clenching the paper tightly, Victoria felt a surge of determination rise within her, fierce and unyielding. This was no longer just about reclaiming a lost daughter. It was a battle for justice, for truth, and for the very soul of their family. She whispered aloud, almost as a vow to the universe and to the child she longed to hold close again. I will do whatever it takes for my daughter to live, not only in my heart, but on every official record in every truth that exists. The fire in her voice echoed her relentless spirit, refusing to let the past define or diminish the bond that had endured through silence and lies. Every legal obstacle, every shadow cast by those who conspired to erase her daughter, would be met with her unwavering resolve. Victoria knew the path ahead would be perilous, fraught with opposition from those who wished to keep the truth buried, but she was ready to fight not just for a name on paper, but for recognition, love, and the future they deserved. In that moment, holding the forged certificate that had once been the final word on her daughter's fate, Victoria made a solemn promise to herself and to Emma. No matter how deep the darkness, no matter the cost, I will bring your story into the light. You will be seen, you will be known, and you will live fully, not as a shadow or a memory, but as my daughter in this world. Victoria sat across from Emma in the softly lit living room, the weight of years pressing heavily on her chest as she searched the child's eyes. Those same extraordinary green eyes that held so much more wisdom than her 8 years should have allowed. Taking a deep breath, Victoria began to unravel the story that had been buried beneath layers of grief, silence, and betrayal for nearly 2 decades. Emma, she said gently, her voice trembling but steady, there's something you need to know. A truth I've kept locked away because it was too painful to face, too complicated to explain until now. Emma leaned in her small hands, clutching the edge of the table, eyes wide and waiting for the words that might finally make sense of her fractured past. Victoria told her how 18 years ago, when she gave birth to a tiny, fragile baby girl, the world around her seemed to crumble. How the man she trusted, the man who should have stood by her, was instead consumed by fear and ambition, orchestrating a terrible deception. She described how official records were forged, how her daughter was declared dead in a hospital fire that never happened, a lie designed to erase Emma from their lives. She told Emma about the cold hands that took her away in the dead of night, about the foster homes, and the years of loneliness and uncertainty, about the lies that tried to make her believe she was unwanted and broken. Victoria's voice faltered only once, overwhelmed by the flood of memories, but Emma remained silent, absorbing every word with a gravity far beyond her years. But Emma Victoria continued, her eyes shining with fierce love. You were never lost. You were never forgotten. I searched for you every day of my life, hoping for a miracle. And now that you're here, I promise you this: I will protect you, fight for you, and never let anyone take you away again. This is our truth, our story, and we will face it together. The room seemed to hold its breath as mother and daughter sat united by a bond that had endured every shadow, every silence, and every stolen moment, finally breaking free into the light of a new beginning. Emma sat across from Victoria, her small hands nervously clasped in her lap as the room seemed to hold its breath. The words Victoria spoke felt heavy, yet fragile, like threads weaving a tapestry of truths Emma had never dared to believe. Emma, you are my daughter. You were taken from me the night you were born. They told me you were gone, lost forever in a fire that never happened. But you survived. I never stopped searching, even when I was told to forget you. The room felt cold shadows pressing in as Emma's wide green eyes flickered with confusion, disbelief, and a flicker of hope that threatened to ignite. For her entire life, Emma had been surrounded by lost families who didn't want her, homes that felt temporary, and whispers of abandonment that settled like dust in her heart. To hear that someone loved her, had mourned her, had never stopped looking, seemed too vast, too sudden, too painful to trust. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Why now? Why tell me this after all this time? How do I know it's real? I've been told lies. My whole life, promises broken, dreams shattered." The weight of skepticism was not born from doubt in her mother's eyes, but from years of living with uncertainty, betrayal, and the harshness of a world that seemed to erase children like her. Victoria reached out gently, taking Emma's hands in hers. I know it's hard to believe. You've faced so much pain, so many losses, and it's natural to question. But I swear to you, every word is true. I have the proof, the memories, and most importantly, my heart has carried you all these years. Emma's gaze dropped the walls she had built, trembling but not yet broken. She thought of the nights curled up in cold beds, the strangers who tried to care but couldn't fill the void, and the constant ache for a family that felt like a distant dream. If this is true, she said slowly, then what happens now? Can I trust that I won't lose you too? Victoria's eyes glistened with tears, her voice steady and full of promise. This time, nothing will take us apart. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. We will face everything together, no matter how hard. The room held a fragile silence, the beginning of a journey, where hope and healing might finally take root amidst a lifetime of doubt. Victoria reached into a small velvet box she had carefully preserved over the years, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the delicate silver locket into the soft light of the room. The locket was worn and tarnished, but its significance was immeasurable, a symbol of love loss and a connection that no one could sever. She opened it slowly to reveal an engraving on the inside, Margaret Emma Whitmore. The name, long buried beneath layers of pain and deceit, was now laid bare before Emma's wide, curious eyes. This, Victoria whispered, her voice thick with emotion, was the name I gave you, the name I dreamed you'd carry through your life. It was hidden from you, stolen along with your childhood, but it is yours, your true name, your real identity. Emma reached out, her small hands shaking as she took the locket, the cold silver, a tangible link to a past she had never known and a mother who had never stopped searching. She turned it over carefully, the engraved letters glowing like a beacon in the dim room, stirring feelings she hadn't allowed herself to feel before: hope, belonging, and a deep, aching recognition. Victoria watched her daughter with tears in her eyes, silently hoping that this simple object could begin to bridge the vast chasm of years they had lost. I kept this for you, Victoria said, even when I thought you were gone forever. It was a promise, a piece of you I held on to when everything else was taken away. It means that no matter where life took us, you were always with me. And now I want you to know that I am here for you fully, without conditions or fear. Emma's gaze softened the weight of isolation, lifting slightly as she clutched the locket close to her heart. It was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a testament to survival, a silent vow that they would reclaim what had been stolen and rebuild the family they were meant to be. The room filled with a quiet reverence, two souls bound not just by blood, but by the resilience of love and the unyielding promise of a future they would face side by side. In that moment, the locket was no longer just an object. It was the key to healing identity and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter. Victoria's voice softened to a whisper as she sat across from Emma, the weight of years and unspoken truths hanging heavily between them. Your name is Margaret Emma, she began gently, her eyes never leaving the child's face. That's the name I gave you when you were born, the name I whispered in the quiet moments when I held you close before the world tore us apart. She reached out lightly, touching Emma's hand as if to reassure both of them that this moment was real, that this truth was finally breaking free from the shadows. I am your mother, your real mother, the one who carried you for 9 months, who dreamed of your first smile, your first steps, who longed for every moment we should have had together. Her voice trembled, the depth of her love and pain pouring through each word. I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped fighting for you, even when they told me you were gone, that you were lost to me forever. Tears glistened in Victoria's eyes as she fought to keep her emotions steady, to be the pillar Emma so desperately needed. No one could ever take away what we share. You are my daughter in every sense that matters. The years of separation, the lies and silences, they don't change that. Emma looked at her, confusion and a flicker of hope mingling in her gaze, the struggle within her palpable. Victoria pressed on softly. I'm sorry you had to live in a world that made you doubt your worth, that made you question if you were wanted or loved. But you were always loved, deeply and truly. And now I am here with open arms ready to make up for every lost day." Her words wrapped around Emma like a warm embrace, a promise to protect, to nurture, to never let go again. "You have a name, a family, a place to belong. And nothing, not fear, not pain, not those who tried to keep us apart can ever change that." She took a steadying breath, her voice firm with resolve. "Margaret Emma, you are my heart, my hope, my greatest love, and I will spend every day proving to you that I am here, that I am yours, and that you are never alone." In the quiet stillness of the room, their bond deepened, fragile, yet unbreakable, a new beginning forged from the truth, long buried but never extinguished. Emma's voice was barely audible, a fragile whisper that trembled with a mixture of pain, confusion, and a lifetime of unanswered questions. "If you're my mother," she said softly, her green eyes searching Victoria's face for something, anything that could make sense of the years she'd spent surviving alone, forgotten and abandoned, "then why did I have to live on the streets?" The room seemed to grow colder, the weight of that question hanging heavy between them, exposing the raw wound beneath their tentative reunion. Victoria's heart clenched painfully as she reached out to gently cup Emma's face, her thumb tracing a slow, soothing circle against her daughter's cheek. "Oh, my sweet girl," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "There are things that happened, things I never wanted for you, things I was powerless to stop." She swallowed hard, the memories of betrayal, lies, and shadowy forces that tore them apart, flooding her mind. "You were taken from me in a way no mother should ever endure. I was told you were gone, that you were dead, and I was forced to believe it, forced to grieve a loss that wasn't real." Victoria's eyes shimmered with tears as she tried to hold back the flood of sorrow that threatened to overwhelm her. "I fought in silence, trapped by those who wanted to keep us apart, who wanted to erase you, to erase me and the truth of our love." Emma's gaze softened just a little, the pain still there, but mingled with a growing understanding of the cruel world she'd been thrust into. "You didn't have to live that way, not because you weren't worthy, but because they made it so hard for both of us. And now that I have you, I will do everything in my power to make sure you never have to be alone or afraid again." Her voice grew stronger, fueled by a fierce determination that surprised even herself. "You will have a home, a family, and a life filled with the love and safety you deserve. The past cannot be undone, but our future is ours to build together." Emma's lips trembled, and she nodded slowly, the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack, just enough to let hope seep through. "Thank you, Mom." She whispered the words, fragile but full of tentative trust. Victoria pulled her close, holding her tightly as if to shield her from all the pain she had endured. "You never deserved any of it," she said fiercely, "and from this moment on, I promise you, you'll never have to face it alone." In that quiet embrace, two souls battered by loss, but bound by love, began the long, uncertain journey toward healing and belonging. Victoria sat in her study, the glow from her laptop casting a pale light across the room, as she sifted through endless rows of digital records and databases that should have held some trace of Emma's existence. Every search she made came up empty. No birth certificate, no social security number, no official documentation whatsoever. It was as if Emma had never legally existed. The weight of that realization pressed heavily on her chest, the cold, stark truth sinking in deeper with each failed query. How could a child born in a hospital who had survived and grown into a bright, resilient girl be erased so completely from the system? Victoria's fingers trembled as she scrolled through hospital records, adoption papers, and government filings, desperate for any scrap of evidence that might explain the void. But the more she looked, the clearer it became. Someone had deliberately wiped Emma's identity from the official records, as if trying to make her invisible to the world. The implications were terrifying. Without legal documentation, Emma had no recognized identity, no protection under the law, no access to basic rights or services. It explained why she had been so vulnerable, why the foster system had failed her so utterly, and why no one had ever come looking with the force that such a loss demanded. This was more than just neglect. It was a calculated erasure, a ghosting of a life that should have been protected and cherished. Victoria leaned back, the enormity of the situation crashing down on her. She realized that finding Emma had only been the first step in a far more daunting battle, a fight not just to reunite their hearts, but to restore Emma's rightful place in the world. She would have to confront powerful forces that had conspired to hide the truth challenge, a system that had failed them both, and rebuild what had been stolen: Emma's identity, her name, and her future. But as she stared at the blank screens where her daughter's official history should have been, Victoria felt a fierce determination ignite within her. This erasure would not be the end. She would tear down every barrier, expose every lie, and bring Emma back, not just into her arms, but into the light of a world that had no right to forget her. Victoria sat at her grand mahogany desk, the weight of the moment pressing down on her as she contemplated the path ahead. After hours of relentless digging through tangled webs of missing documents, forged papers, and hidden truths, the stark reality was undeniable. Emma had been erased from the system, denied the legal existence every child deserved. It was no longer just a personal heartbreak. It was a profound injustice that demanded a public reckoning. With a firm resolve settling over her, Victoria knew that the only way to reclaim her daughter's rightful place was through the courts. She would take on the powerful forces that had orchestrated this conspiracy, the same forces that had silenced so many before her. The courtroom would become their battleground, not just for Emma's identity, but for justice, truth, and restoration. Victoria began assembling her legal team, reaching out to trusted attorneys who had experience with complex cases involving corruption and institutional failure. She needed experts who could navigate the treacherous intersection of law, politics, and human rights. Every piece of evidence, doctored death certificates, hidden hospital records, witness testimonies, would be weaponized in their fight to expose the dark cover-up that had stolen years from Emma and herself. But Victoria was acutely aware this battle would be far from easy. The opposition wielded immense power, political influence, and vast resources. She would be up against a system designed to protect the privileged and bury inconvenient truths. Yet her resolve only deepened in the face of these challenges. This was no longer just about reuniting a family. It was about dismantling a lie that had destroyed countless lives. As she prepared her case, Victoria thought about the countless children like Emma, invisible and forgotten by a broken system. She vowed that their voices would be heard too. The courtroom would shine a light on these dark corners and force accountability where there had been silence. With every document signed and every strategy meeting held, Victoria fortified herself for the fight ahead, fueled by a mother's fierce love and unyielding commitment. She would not rest until Emma's name was restored, her life recognized in the eyes of the law, and her future secured. The trial would be a war for truth, and Victoria Sterling was ready to lead the charge. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation, and the hum of whispered conversations. When Claire took the stand, her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady as she recounted the truth she had long carried in silence. She spoke of the falsified death certificate, the orders from powerful figures to erase Victoria's daughter from existence, and the crushing weight of guilt that had haunted her all these years. Her testimony was raw, and revealing a dam breaking after decades of secrets. Not long after Jolene, the former housekeeper who had cared for Victoria's family, appeared, her eyes red-rimmed from tears. Her words cut through the courtroom like a knife as she affirmed that Emma was indeed Victoria's daughter, pointing to the unmistakable green eyes and the locket they had both known so well. Jolene's heartfelt account of the child's early days and the unbearable pain of watching her disappear stirred an emotional wave among those present. Outside the courtroom, reporters clamored for every detail, their cameras capturing the heavy emotions etched on Victoria's face and the somber resolve in Emma's eyes. The story exploded across media outlets, headlines blaring the scandal of a powerful political cover-up and the harrowing tale of a mother's fight to reclaim her lost daughter. News anchors dissected the testimonies, experts debated the implications, and social media ignited with public outrage and support. The courtroom drama became a national conversation about corruption, the failures of the foster care system, and the resilience of a family torn apart but refusing to be broken. Victoria felt both the crushing pressure and the empowering surge of hope. The voices of Claire and Jolene had broken the silence and begun to unravel a carefully constructed lie shining light on a truth long buried. Each testimony was a victory in itself, a step closer to justice, and a beacon for other families lost in similar shadows. The world was watching now, and Victoria knew the fight was far from over. But with every word spoken and every eye opened, they were moving closer to a reckoning that could not be ignored. In this moment, the power of truth and witness became unstoppable. The day Emma was invited to speak before a gathered crowd was one neither she nor Victoria would ever forget. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as reporters, advocates, and supporters filled every seat, eager to hear the voice that had shattered silence and brought hidden truths into the light. When Emma stepped up to the microphone, her small frame belied the strength and courage radiating from her. Her eyes, the same extraordinary green that had once captured Victoria's heart, scanned the audience with quiet determination. Taking a steady breath, she began, her voice clear and steady despite the weight of the moment. "I am not a mistake," she said, her words cutting through the room like a beacon of hope and defiance. "I am a person, a daughter, a human being who deserves love, care, and a chance to live a full life." She paused, letting the silence hold the power of her message. "For years I was told I was unwanted, broken, something to be hidden away and forgotten. But that is not the truth." Her gaze shifted toward Victoria, who stood just off stage, tears glistening in her eyes. "My mother never left me. She searched for me when everyone else said I was gone. Even when I couldn't believe it myself, she never stopped fighting to bring me home." The room was silent, touched by the raw honesty and unyielding spirit of the young girl standing before them. Emma's words spoke not only for herself, but for countless others, lost in systems that failed to protect them. "I am here today to say that every child deserves to be seen and heard, not erased or hidden because of fear or shame. Our stories matter. Our lives matter." She looked out across the sea of faces, finding strength in their attention and empathy. "I want to be a voice for those who cannot speak, a reminder that we are not mistakes or burdens, but people worthy of love and belonging." As she finished, a wave of applause swept through the room, not just for Emma's bravery, but for the undeniable truth she embodied. Victoria felt a profound pride swell within her, the pride of a mother reunited, of a daughter reclaiming her story, and of a family refusing to be silenced. Emma's words had transcended the personal. They had become a call to action, a declaration of hope, and a promise that no one would ever be forgotten again. In that moment, the future seemed a little brighter, shaped by the courage of a child who had found her voice and the mother who never gave up. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence, the kind that settles just before a life-altering decision is announced. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and emotional appeals, everyone awaited the judge's final ruling with bated breath. Victoria sat beside Emma, her hand gently holding the girl's trembling fingers, both of them anchored by hope, but still bracing for the unknown. Emma's eyes, bright with determination yet shadowed by years of uncertainty, never left the judge's bench. The attorneys had laid bare a tangled web of deceit, corruption, and broken promises that had stolen nearly a decade of Emma's life. Witnesses had spoken courageously, Claire recounting her coerced role in fabricating documents, Jolene testifying with tears about the truth she could no longer hide, and the courtroom had been gripped by the raw reality of a child erased from the system by powerful forces desperate to keep secrets. Now the judge leaned forward, his expression grave but resolute. With a firm yet compassionate voice, he declared, "After careful review of all evidence and testimonies, it is the court's determination that this child is none other than Margaret Emma Whitmore." A hush fell over the room, broken only by a few gasps of relief and disbelief. Furthermore, he continued, "The court recognizes her rightful place with her biological mother, Victoria Sterling. This child has a family, and that family shall be restored to her without delay." The words carried weight far beyond the legal realm. They were a reclaiming of identity, justice, and belonging. Tears streamed down Victoria's face as she looked at Emma, who smiled shyly. feeling the profound truth of finally being seen, known, and loved. The judge's gavel came down with a decisive thud, sealing the verdict and echoing the promise of a new beginning. "Let it be known," he said firmly, "that Margaret Emma Whitmore is no longer lost, no longer invisible. She has a name, a history, and a family who will protect and cherish her." In that moment, years of pain, silence, and separation began to dissolve, replaced by the light of hope, reunion, and the healing power of truth. Emma, now officially recognized, was free to live not as a forgotten child, but as a beloved daughter. Her story finally honored her future, reclaimed, and her place in the world forever secured. In the months following the court's landmark decision, Victoria Sterling found herself driven by a purpose far greater than reclaiming her own daughter's identity. She was compelled to fight for every child who had been lost in the shadows of bureaucratic neglect and corruption. With unwavering determination, Victoria established the Ellie Foundation, named in honor of the little girl whose courage had ignited a movement for justice. The Foundation's mission was clear and urgent: to locate, identify, and restore the identities of children erased from official records. Children like Emma, who had been severed from their families not by fate but by deliberate, cruel acts of concealment. Drawing from her extensive network in finance, law, and social advocacy, Victoria assembled a team of experts committed to this cause: private investigators who meticulously traced missing records, lawyers who fought legal battles to reinstate names and rights, social workers who provided care and stability for vulnerable children, and counselors who helped heal deep emotional wounds caused by years of abandonment and invisibility. The Ellie Foundation also partnered with hospitals, child welfare agencies, and government bodies to reform systemic failures, pushing for transparency and accountability to prevent future injustices. Through media campaigns and community outreach, Victoria shared Emma's story, widely turning public attention toward the plight of forgotten children and inspiring countless others to come forward. Every success story, every child reunited with their family or given a legal identity, was a testament to the Foundation's impact and a beacon of hope in a world that had too often turned a blind eye. Victoria personally oversaw the Foundation's programs, frequently meeting with families, listening to their stories, and offering support that went beyond paperwork, an act of presence and compassion that she had longed for during her own darkest days. She understood that identity was more than a name or a legal document. It was the foundation of dignity, belonging, and self-worth. The Foundation's work was not without challenges. Entrenched interests resisted change, and bureaucratic obstacles often slowed progress, but Victoria's resolve never wavered. Each barrier broken was a victory, not only for individual children, but for a broader movement toward justice and humanity. Through the Ellie Foundation, Victoria transformed her personal tragedy into a powerful legacy, one that ensured that no child would ever again be erased or forgotten, that every lost soul would have a chance to reclaim their story, their name, and their rightful place in the world. Her vision was bold, her commitment relentless, and in doing so, Victoria Sterling became not just a mother fighting for her daughter, but a fierce guardian for all children who deserved to be seen, known, and loved. As the revelations surrounding the disappearance of Margaret Emma Whitmore and the web of deception orchestrated by Senator Thomas Callahan came to light, the political landscape shifted dramatically, sending shockwaves through the corridors of power. The mounting evidence of Callahan's involvement in the falsification of vital records, his abuse of political influence to suppress the truth, and the manipulation of social services to maintain a facade of control left him increasingly isolated and vulnerable. Media outlets relentlessly pursued the story, exposing the senator's role in silencing families, destroying lives, and prioritizing political ambition over justice and humanity. Public outrage grew exponentially as citizens demanded accountability, with protests and petitions calling for immediate action against the man who had wielded power at the expense of innocent children and grieving parents. Within his own party, influential figures began to distance themselves, recognizing that Callahan's continued presence posed an unbearable liability to their collective reputation and legislative agenda. The pressure mounted behind closed doors and legal proceedings advanced rapidly as investigators presented irrefutable proof of misconduct, including whistleblower testimonies from former social workers, leaked documents detailing the cover-up, and damning communications that implicated Callahan in decisions to erase children's identities. Confronted by overwhelming evidence and mounting political and public pressure, Callahan found his support evaporating. In a moment, broadcast live to millions, the senator finally announced his resignation, his voice a mixture of defiance and resignation as he acknowledged the consequences of his actions, but stopped short of a full apology. The fall of Thomas Callahan was more than just the end of a political career. It symbolized a hard-fought victory for truth and justice, a repudiation of the corrupt systems that had allowed such abuses to persist unchecked for so long. For Victoria Sterling and her daughter Emma, the resignation was bittersweet, a validation of their struggle, but also a reminder of the profound damage inflicted by those entrusted to protect the vulnerable. The political upheaval opened the door for sweeping reforms aimed at safeguarding children's rights, increasing transparency in child welfare systems, and preventing the kind of abuse that had torn families apart. Advocacy groups and legislators inspired by the Ellie Foundation's mission rallied to enact new laws that mandated greater oversight, harsher penalties for those who manipulate the system, and comprehensive support for children with erased or falsified identities. As the dust settled, Victoria remained vigilant, knowing that the fight for justice extended far beyond one resignation. Yet the senator's downfall served as a powerful testament to the courage of a mother who refused to be silenced, the resilience of a child who reclaimed her truth, and the collective power of a community united against corruption. The story of Thomas Callahan's resignation was a landmark moment, a signal to all those who might abuse power that their actions would not go unchallenged, and a hopeful beacon for every lost child waiting to be found. The evening sun cast a warm golden glow over the quiet park as Victoria and Emma walked hand in hand, their steps slow but steady, filled with a mix of relief, hope, and unspoken promises. The city around them buzzed with life, but in this small, tranquil corner time seemed to pause, a sacred space that had come to symbolize the fragile beginning of their new life together. Their destination was a simple wooden bench nestled beneath a sprawling oak tree, the very spot where their worlds had collided for the first time, where Emma, a small, weary girl wrapped in tattered clothes, had hesitantly approached Victoria with a question that would forever change their lives. "Can I eat your leftovers?" The memory of that moment was etched deep in Victoria's heart, a stark contrast to the opulence and isolation that had defined her life for so many years. Now, sitting side by side on the weathered bench, the two shared a quiet closeness, the kind that only comes from surviving storms together and choosing to stay. Emma's green eyes, so familiar and yet so full of wonder, met Victoria's gaze, and in that exchange was a world of understanding of pain, endured losses, mourned, and the fierce love that had refused to let them be torn apart again. The bench held the echoes of that first connection, the hesitant trust given and received, the fragile hope that had blossomed despite everything. As the gentle breeze stirred the leaves above, Victoria reached out, tucking a stray lock of Emma's hair behind her ear, her voice soft but resolute as she whispered, "This is where it all began, and where it will never end." Emma leaned into her mother's embrace, the weight of years of loneliness lifting, as she finally felt safe, seen, and loved without conditions. Around them the city moved on, but here on this humble bench, a mother and daughter reclaimed the time stolen from them and forged a future built on truth presence and unbreakable bonds. In the fading light, Victoria promised herself that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would carry Emma's hand through every moment, because some meetings are miracles and some loves are forever. As the soft glow of the city lights began to twinkle around them, Emma nestled closer to Victoria, her small head resting gently against her mother's shoulder. The quiet hum of the evening felt like a soothing balm after so many years of uncertainty and fear. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a warmth that went beyond the physical comfort of being indoors, or the security of a roof over her head. It was the steady, unwavering presence of a mother who had fought through darkness and deception to find her. Her voice was barely above a whisper, fragile yet filled with a profound sense of connection, as she asked Mom, "Do you remember the very first thing I ever said to you?" Victoria's heart tightened, memories flooding back to that unforgettable night in the restaurant when a little ragged girl had timidly approached her and asked the question that changed everything. "Can I eat your leftovers?" She smiled softly, her eyes glistening with tears as she replied with absolute certainty. "I remember it, and I will never let you go hungry again, not for food and not for love." Those words held the weight of a promise forged in pain and perseverance, a vow that no matter the obstacles, no matter the threats and betrayals that had tried to tear them apart, Victoria would be there to nurture and protect Emma with every fiber of her being. The journey to this moment had been fraught with heartbreak and revelation, but as Emma's fingers intertwined with hers, the past seemed to melt away, replaced by a future glowing with hope. Emma lifted her gaze to meet Victoria's, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and determination. "I never want to feel alone again," she said softly, her voice steady despite the vulnerability beneath it. Victoria pressed a gentle kiss to Emma's forehead, her voice thick with emotion as she whispered, "You will never be alone. I'm here now and always, your home." In that quiet embrace, surrounded by the sounds of a city that had witnessed their struggle and triumph, mother and daughter sealed a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. It was a new beginning, born from the most unlikely of encounters, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the simple yet profound act of being seen and chosen. Together, they would face whatever came next, their hearts forever intertwined by a promise made over a plate of leftovers and a lifetime of unwavering devotion. The park was bathed in the soft golden hues of late afternoon, the gentle rustling of leaves blending with distant laughter and the occasional chirp of birds settling in for evening. Victoria and Emma walked hand in hand along the winding path, their steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment of this rare tranquility. They reached the familiar bench, a simple stone seat, nestled beneath a sprawling oak tree, its branches stretching protectively over the quiet spot. This was where their journey had truly begun, the place where a homeless child had dared to ask a stranger, "Can I eat your leftovers?" and unknowingly ignited a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The bench had become a symbol of hope, reunion, and the enduring strength of love that had weathered years of silence, loss, and betrayal. Victoria gently guided Emma to sit, then pulled a small chisel and hammer from her bag tools she had brought specifically for this moment. With tender care, she began etching two names side by side into the cold stone, Emma Whitmore and Margaret Sterling. As the letters slowly took shape, the gravity of what they represented settled around them, a powerful declaration that after all the pain, the lies, and the years spent apart, they had finally found each other. The inscription was simple, yet profound. "We found each other." Emma watched intently, her eyes reflecting the depth of emotion she still struggled to put into words. To her, those words captured not just their reunion, but the reclamation of identity, family, and a future rebuilt from the fragments of a stolen past. Victoria paused, tracing the letters with her fingers, then looked at her daughter with unwavering resolve. "No matter what comes next," she said softly, "this bench, these names, this moment, it's ours. A promise that we belong to each other, and that nothing can ever take that away." Emma smiled, leaning into her mother's warmth, feeling the weight of the world lift just a little. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a lost child or a hidden secret. She was Margaret Emma Whitmore, daughter, survivor, and beloved. Together they rose from the bench, their hands still clasped tightly, stepping forward into a future they would face as one. Around them, the park seemed to hold its breath, the fading light casting long shadows that whispered of endings and new beginnings. In that quiet moment, the past and the present converged, and the simple inscription on a stone bench became a testament to a love that had endured time, deception, and silence, a love that had finally won. Emma Whitmore and Margaret Sterling. We found each other. Life often teaches us that the deepest wounds are not always visible, and the most profound losses can shape us in ways we never expected. Victoria and Emma's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how far apart we are or how lost we may feel, love has a way of finding us again, sometimes in the most unexpected places. It shows us the importance of never giving up hope, even when circumstances seem hopeless, and the strength that comes from fighting for truth and justice, no matter how difficult the path may be. In real life, Many people face hidden struggles. Separation from loved ones, injustice, or erasure of identity, and their courage to seek connection and reclaim their story is something we can all learn from. This story encourages us to be kinder and more aware of those around us, because sometimes a simple act of compassion, a listening ear, a helping hand, can change a life forever. It also reminds us that fighting for what is right, standing up against injustice, and protecting those who are vulnerable is not just the responsibility of a few, but a collective mission we must all embrace. If this story touched your heart or inspired you in any way, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Don't forget to save this video so you can return to it whenever you need a reminder of hope and resilience. And if you want to hear more stories that uplift and inspire, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. Together we can keep the conversation going and continue to spread kindness and courage in the world.